Starting. We're live. Okay. So, this is Brian McDonald, Tim Arthur, Ryan Boyles, talking Google Fiber.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
So, I'm glad you guys could join us tonight. So, one of the things looking at Google Fiber coming in the area is, comparing it to what we have now. Tim, you were talking earlier about, that there's better alternatives where you live, but it's really a challenge of what the service offering is.
Right. Well, currently, I've got 50 megabit downstream and 5 megabit upstream, and I'm paying about $80 a month for that for a business class connection, which is far below what a fiber connection would offer, and from what I've gathered in terms of pricing, far more than I would be paying as well for a much better connection.
Yeah.
So in terms of what I do and what Ryan does as well, we broadcast audio and video programming, record calls over the internet, and record and release as podcasts and video podcasts. And it's very bandwidth intensive, so we would like as much bandwidth as possible for that purpose alone. But we're also very heavy users in our households of streaming services like Netflix. My DirecTV satellite box actually uses the internet to pull down DVR content from on-demand programming and record it. So it also uses the internet for that. So pretty heavy usage overall, and would like to see something a little bit more robust and competitive in terms of price versus traditional telco and cable companies.
Ryan, you were talking earlier. You're in Wake Forest, and Wake's looking at a whole different way of doing it, where they might be able to deploy faster on a smaller footprint with a smaller, more eager, independent company that is based in North Carolina, for one, which is good. But I guess there's a bit of a risk-reward there of can they get it deployed and it will be reliable now.
Yeah, I guess this is the epitome of what we love here in the Triangle, the shop local mentality, which I kind of dig. But I just discovered this story and the website, the initiative. It's been going on for a bit of time now, but wakeforestfiber.com, apparently you can find out all about it. But I love I think the competitive nature of what they're trying to do is maybe a bit of a good thing for us, right? I think everyone is rushing, though. I mean, when you talk about like my bandwidth, so my bandwidth at my house, currently I use Time Warner. I'm paying about $65 to $70 a month, and I've got a 30 megabit down and probably 12 up, 10 to 15 up, and I still struggle with using some of the services. We're a multi-computer house, multi-smartphone house, tablets. We're using Netflix. We're using Hulu. We're using Amazon streaming. We're using Spotify. We're all of the services that are my children are growing up on these services. But when I look at the price of it, it really doesn't match the service that I think I deserve, I guess. And that $80 a month really doesn't match. Even what I use over on the mobile side. When you add in the mobile usage through something like AT&T, then you're talking about adding another, in my case, another $160 a month.
Yeah, well, and that was something else we were talking about. We're all heavy users. We all have kids that are now becoming users as well. I know I went up to my daughter's room and she's listening to an audiobook on YouTube, which, the first thing I say to her is, you're using up too much bandwidth. That should be an audio stream only. Why are you using up video bandwidth? And
Right.
I realize that, yes, it doesn't really matter to them. They're not looking at that. It's almost like our father's telling us to shut the door and, the heat. They're spending too much money on the heat to heat the house, so they keep it cold a bit. But I do think that we're going to be victims of 4 or 5 power users in the home. And I did the same thing as far as after seeing you guys talk about the streaming service. I got rid of my cable and just went full on the highest level that I can get from Uverse and just started streaming and going over the air. But I know now I'm sitting on my phone at night watching television shows that I would have been watching on my DVR.
Right. Well, and I think you're bringing up a good point about the children, right? We're all, not only are we power users, like you said, but we have children that are entering the teenage years, right? If they're not there yet, they're definitely they're young power users themselves, and they're going to be more. I would assert that they're going to be more of a power user than even we are, because they're sort of, they're beyond being a millennial. I think they're this Generation Z that everybody's talking about, where they were born, where everything is on the cloud. They don't understand how the internet works. I mean, it's just magic that appears in an app somewhere. And so for them to use Netflix or to use Spotify or to use these other things, it's like, to them, it's like a utility that's just expected to always be on, always be available. They don't, I mean, half the time when the kids are so young using these devices, I'm teaching them as we go, but they get in the car, we drive away from the house, they don't understand why Wi-Fi went away, right? So I mean, they don't even have the concept of there being a cord or even the differences between these different spectrum, devices. So their expectation is that it's always going to be there and it's always going to be great, or else it's malfunctioning for them and they don't want to use the service anymore.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I bought my daughter a Chromebook, and I think that's with the T-Mobile bundles in 2 free years, which I thought was brilliant. Go ahead now and like establish something where if they can get the service, I mean, T-Mobile doesn't have the coverage, and therefore you get a lot better price, but nonetheless, it might almost be this brand love of, I had T-Mobile, that was my first mobile connection on this Chromebook my parents got me for $200.
Right.
And that starts their brand relationship that they may continue for a long time.
But even though I agree, and I consider doing the same thing with a Chromebook, but the more I thought about it, the more I was wary of the lock-in to that service, meaning they're sort of tricking you into thinking that, again, it's a magic box that just connects to the cloud automagically, and you don't have to worry about the bill and all that. But at the end of the day, now you see carriers like Sprint and T-Mobile taking away their unlimited services, because as they grow out their footprint and as they grow out their user base, they're forced to do that. They only have a finite amount of spectrum. So as they become more popular, they actually have to take away the popular services. And so they automatically become more like a Time Warner Cable or a Uverse or an AT&T, where they have to practically think about throttling to some degree and taking away these unlimited services that they've sort of, that's one of the biggest marketing ploys that's gotten people signed up over the last 5 to 10 years. I know, for example, I don't know about you, Tim, but when I signed up for my first mobile phone in like 1998 or 9, I got a DCS phone. They became, what did they become? They became
Singular.
Sorry?
Singular.
Yeah, they became Singular. Singular essentially became AT&T eventually, and so I've been a customer of them all this time. And when I bought my first smartphone, my first iPhone, I was a laggard to that party, but I was able to sign up to an unlimited service, and I'm still using the unlimited service. And so now I'm struggling with the fact that they won't let you add new family members without converting to one of their essentially downgraded services, which they tell you is a great bargain, but they're capping you. And I see that's going to become growingly, it's more and more, it's going to become an issue for the users.
Well, let me ask you, I too was grandfathered in with AT&T when I got my iPhone to keep my unlimited data plan. And I would consider myself to be a above average user, probably not as heavy as you. And for several months in a row, I got notifications from them telling me I was using too much bandwidth. And then if that continued, they were going to cap my bandwidth. and
Right.
charge me for overages. Now, speaking more along the lines of the ecosystem that you're talking about in terms of Chrome and T-Mobile and whatnot, um, we were talking about essentially one of the major players coming in into this area with fiber is Google Fiber, and I think that's worthy of discussion in the sense that how much are you tied to Google's ecosystem in using that service? Because speaking of Chromebooks, my daughter, who is now in 6th grade, they've been using Chromebooks in school for a couple of years now. Johnston County Schools basically must have like a large Google domain that they have. They use Google Apps for just about everything. They have homework assignments sent from teachers through Google Apps into their Google Drives. They share they save their stuff. They draw in the applications within the Google Apps. All of that. My daughter's email address is a Google Apps email, but it's owned by the school district technically in Google's ecosystem. So
Right.
my question to you is, they're really branding these kids at not just a consumer level, but at an educational level to using these ecosystems. Yes, it's a free ecosystem to use for now, but we already know how Google has changed their model from free apps for domains for certain levels of usage to, okay, well, yeah, now that's a paid service if you want to go above 5 users or whatnot, and if you want to add a custom domain, that's going to be more money. So they're getting out of that ecosystem of everything is free. Same thing with the Google Drive. They give you so much space, and you can buy more space if you need it. But I think my question is there anything limiting in terms of using Google Fiber where you have to stay within the realm of their ecosystem to some extent? I guess that's a question that I have not had answered yet, and I'm interested to see how that plays out. Maybe not now, but going forward. You know, they're offering you this sweet, extremely competitive package for a tremendous amount of services or bandwidth. What's coming down the line in terms of, okay, well, we sweetened it up here with some real great freebies for a while, but now we're going to start monetizing that more in some different platforms. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, I think that's sort of the freemium model of a lot of companies, right? I mean, even if you think about Dropbox or Box.com, they're doing the same thing with the business side of the house. So they're converting enterprise app users to use similar types of services. They're not. It's more of an application ecosystem or the platform layer. But I see it as a similar freemium model. I would also equate the Google, educational initiatives or network, the ecosystem, as it's similar to what Apple does with their software and hardware too, right? They've had a long history of offering deep discounts to students to use their stuff, and they've been fairly successful with that, right? They've essentially trained the new generation not only to think that iPhones are cool, but that MacBooks are cool for doing the power stuff. So I'm not sure how to answer your question in terms of is there a lock-in scheme there? But I can't see that far ahead.
I think there is kind of almost the same way in the early days of the internet, AOL sending out the disk, right?
Yep.
And for you and I don't think we'll be locked in to, okay, we'd have to use Gmail or whatever, because we know how to say this is a pipe, and we're going to use that pipe whether we're using something like FTP or just a browser. But I think to the average user, it's going to come bundled in that way to even if they're brand new, they hook up, or they just moved in, they hook up, and it's going to be like, hey, here it is, it's easy to use. And yeah, there's very low barrier to entry. I think the point you made about the schools is interesting, because I was talking to Paul Jones about that. I was saying, don't you think that Google as a platform has made a case for students or people under the age of 20, where it's been very easy to deploy, low barriers of entry, very easy to use, and I think almost it's like they've used the freemium model as a perfect beta to build a platform and ecosystem that's going to be longer sustaining than the way that we looked at software releases of operating systems for 3 or 4 years, right? So I think you're right, Tim, as far as it's becoming second nature to them, just as much as Apple did over the past 15 years. And you've got kids that are probably 21 today, and if you put them on a Windows machine, they wouldn't know what to do.
Well, and I think the other same analogy that I would say is Microsoft used to give away Office, right, to students for free, and it's the same thing. They wanted to be the dominating Office suite. Well, now I think Google has taken over that space because they've offered, not only is it free for a student to use, even just on their personal account, but now they have the disk space on Drive, and they also, it's in the cloud, so they can use it on any device, their phone included, and that's brilliant, right? My son goes to a magnet middle school, and he does all of his schoolwork in the Google's app ecosystem, right? On Google Drive now, and that's not even being mandated by the school, or it's not part of the school program like yours, Tim, but it may as well be because that's the best option for him to use right now. He wouldn't know what to do with Microsoft Word, and frankly, he doesn't need it because it saves in
DocX format.
Well, it's more cumbersome to deal with files. Right now, he doesn't need to worry about even naming a file. It's just out there with a timestamp.
You know, it's funny because my kids are in the magnet program too, but a different school, the one here in Cary. And at first, they were using PowerPoint, so they're coming home saying, "PowerPoint, I need a flash drive." And so I actually told them to get on Google Docs and do it this way. And at first, the presentations of the tool of Google, they didn't like. I think PowerPoint's got a little bit better user interface, been around a lot longer. But nonetheless, I told them, I was like, no, you need to use this. You need to access it in the cloud and not have to worry about this memory stick and stuff. So it's interesting. So you guys, it's interesting to hear 3 different ways that they're doing it in the same county school system.
Well, they've discovered it 3 different ways, but they all arrived at the same natural answer, which is, you're right, that is cool. I think the other thing about Google Drive that's interesting, I mean, it's not the only game in town. It's not the only cloud app service that I use by any means, but it is something where it's almost like think of WhatsApp for a minute, or all the new ephemeral messaging apps. I see my children using it in the same way. Like they create a file for a project and it's due in 2 days. They print it out or they email it and it's gone. They don't care about it. They don't even care about naming the file. Like they literally just use it to format the text that they need, insert the images, insert the drawings, and boom, submit it. And they don't care about the file anymore. So it's very much like the popularity of the ephemeral messaging apps. They're using, the behavior is the same. And the cloud and the bandwidth that they enjoy is what enables that. So to bring it back to the bandwidth question, how much, as things like the Blackboard program expands to become a suite that's more than just a directory of like the syllabus of the class, when it becomes the actual platform they plug into, maybe Google Drive or Google Apps plug into that and become a one-stop shop one day, what bandwidth is needed to do that effectively on your tablet? So bringing it back to this question of bandwidth, what do we need? That's really a key question. What do we need?
I don't think there's any accurate way. I mean, the only thing that we can really predict in terms of what we need is an aggregate analysis of what we use now, because we all know that services are changing on pretty much a daily basis in terms of what we use, and the volume increases so dramatically, so fast. So unless the scale is designed with some type of a price protection for us as consumers, I think there's no way around us needing to consume more in the future. And as long as the model from a standpoint becomes metered or remains a metered model, we're going to pay more, I believe, unless the cost per. I mean, we know that the cost per gigabit has probably gone down over time. But when you look at telcos and you look at something as simple as a text message, you've got 140 characters, and they were charging, before they had unlimited text plans, they were charging 50 cents per text. So essentially 50 cents for less than 140K of data.
Yeah.
Aggregating that out on a gigabit, I mean, that was like, for a megabyte of data, you're paying like $30, for text. By the time you calculate that out. So that scale has always been flawed. I think a lot's going to hinge on whether or not if they ever do offer an unmetered program that is a true unmetered program.
Well, that's a good question then. So for the fiber plans that we're talking about, whether it's Google Fiber, whether it's RTS, or sorry, is it RST? This company with trying with the town of Wake Forest. If are they going to have unlimited plans? Are they going to have tiered offerings? Just because they have the bandwidth to do, a gigabit or 10 gigabits. I mean, I think they're looking at just 1 gigabit right now, but when does it go to 10? Do those become tiers? Are you going to have a tiered pricing model? So if we continue with tiered, how do you grow without paying huge penalties? With my mobile plan right now, for example, even though I'm grandfathered into this unlimited data, I've been warned 3 times in the last 12 months that I am in the top 5% of users in my, I think, region. I don't know how they measure that region, but that's essentially how they're doing it. And so the question there is, okay, if I'm always below the top 5%, am I okay? So if everyone's growing at the same sort of pace and everyone starts consuming more, am I okay as long as I stay down in this safe range? I don't think they've answered that question for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's going to be tiered no matter what. I mean, they have to, because I agree. I think there is, people like you, Ryan, out there watching 800 shows on several devices. But I'm becoming the same animal, and I'm actually capped off on my mobile at 2, and on Verizon, and
well, so here's the thing. Here's my worry though. I was a power user by virtue of the fact that I never used Wi-Fi on my mobile device up until I started getting these warnings. So I was always using the 3G or the 4G or the LTE at home, because honestly that was faster than my internet connection in a lot of cases. And so I didn't ever see the need to turn on Wi-Fi, plus Wi-Fi burns my battery quicker. So when you look at it from the user perspective, I was doing what was convenient. But all of a sudden I started hitting their retroactively imposed limit, even though I thought I was unlimited. And so their answer is, well, just switch to Wi-Fi. But all they're doing is shifting the burden back to a different service that you're paying for, and in my case, I'm paying a different company for that bandwidth. And so now that Comcast has bought TWC, I mean, there's a lot of talk about how that means the end of unlimited data in the broadband provider space, right? Because Comcast is doing that in their other markets, so of course they're going to bring that to TWC, that policy. And so then when I have a cap on TWC, now I'm being it's kind of like the candles burning at both ends. Which one burns faster? Which one disappears quicker? It becomes this thing that I don't feel like, I'm not equipped or don't want to be bothered with managing that myself. I know that kids aren't going to want to do that, right? They just want the app to do stuff. And the apps, I mean, as a software developer, I mean, I can speak to the fact that our apps that are being built, you can tell, like when you download something on your phone and it's 50 megabytes and it's a messaging app, I'm thinking to myself, why is that so bloated, right? That must mean their code is bad. And so you see that then those sorts of apps that aren't very high performant, they aren't designed very well, they're going to be more chatty on the network. They're going to use more data. Potentially, right? This is all hypothetical, but I mean, it's the kind of things that a techie, over-analyzer, analytical guy like me thinks about, right? Because I know that there's 37 apps on my son's iPad, and half of them are crap that he just wanted to try out.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot too. We're a very consumer-driven market where we want to try something, and if something's not going to meet our needs, we abandon it very quickly.
And I wanted to get back to something you said earlier about, we know this fiber's out in our street. In fact, I mean, thinking about it, I remember, working for Ericsson and doing PBX sales years ago, and fiber was in the curb 25 years ago when the phone company threw it down and we're bundling all the voice over it. I think what's going to be interesting is that, so now fiber to the home is more than just laying out this new neighborhood and laying the big pipe. Now you've got to take that big pipe and push it out to every house, and so now it's much more specialized. So I mean, it's a change in how, I mean, you guys have sat there while the guys come and brought the next twisted pair of copper wire into your home, and it's gotten these many new things. Now we're going to go to an entire different way of the way that's brought into the home through the service entry. I think that's going to be interesting, but I think it's going to be interesting too is it'd be interesting in that Wake Forest versus Raleigh, because Google's got enough money to just deploy a ton of people and get it done. With RST, I mean, Wake's not as big, but it's still sizable. So I think that's the other interesting thing, because I think when you bring this in, when they bring it in, they don't want to do the way AT&T brought Uverse in here, where it was we're going to pick 5 neighborhoods and test it out, and then we're going to add 4 more. It's going to happen in 9 months, and then boom, it's here, or at least for the first phase. But what do you guys think about that as far as how the ability to actually deploy this?
As a person living in Wake Forest, though, like I said at the top of the call, right, I would love to have 2 fiber services to choose from. That's goodness for me, I think, because hopefully, I don't feel like I have the same competitive advantage as a consumer right now with broadband, because Uverse, like you said, Uverse is only available in certain zip codes on certain streets. Literally, if I look at the map, and I've been watching it closely for 2 years now, I've been waiting on the waiting list for Uverse for 3 or 4 years. Every time I go look at their map, it's literally available a mile from my house, but not on my street. So that's been a frustration where I don't have another choice. I can't choose Uverse. I can't choose Comcast. There is not that competitive advantage for me right now. So I just have to harass Time Warner Cable to keep lowering my bill every time I get unhappy, which isn't the way I think a business should, work with their customers, frankly.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. There's really no competition. I don't have the option for a Uverse, or I think in my area they have what's called Prism Link or something, but they haven't brought it into my neighborhood yet, and that might be fiber. I'm not certain. But there really is no option other. I mean, we have cable, satellite internet's not even a viable option in my opinion. It's ridiculously priced and unreliable.
Yeah.
Because of latency issues. And I know several people that are in areas that I wouldn't consider to be rural, but the way the cable industry works is they won't run a cable unless you have a certain demographic available in your neighborhood. If you're on a street that has less than a certain number of households, they're not going to run a cable. You can opt to have that done yourself, but that cost is upwards of $10,000 from what I've seen.
Yeah, because you're paying. That's just it. Like I said, that's the bigger pipe, right? The utility cost. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, what's the utility cost when you go across, a market of almost 1 million people. Um, Granted, they can't do everybody at once. So Tim, you're on business class Time Warner. Ryan, are you on business class aware, or are you just doing the highest consumer level?
I think I'm on Roadrunner Turbo, maybe one level up from Turbo, whatever that is.
So what are you guys getting for what you're paying now, as far as like with Uverse? I have to admit, of all of them, I've been pleasantly surprised with them, because I think I'm getting around 16 down and about 2 up, or maybe about, yeah. I just did a speed test, and that's what it's telling me.
I get a fixed 50 down and 5 up, and it's very, very, very stable. In business class, to my knowledge, you're not standard consumer grade. From what I've been told and the way I understand it works is you are basically competing for bandwidth with others on your node.
Yeah.
Whereas on business class, you are guaranteed. I don't believe there's an SLA involved in terms of a guarantee, but my experience has been that I have consistently gotten just about 50 megabits down, 5 up.
What they're doing, they're basically they're giving you higher priority. Mm-hmm. I'm sure. So you're getting that dedicated. Is my window not popping up?
No,
when I speak, it seems like I don't come into view.
You're fine.
Okay.
Coming up.
All right. Anyhow, I've had that problem on Hangouts before, where somebody gets locked in and it's only their face, no matter who's talking. Anyway, and I know you don't want to stare at me the whole time. But with my Time Warner, it's consistently been around 28 to 30 down and about 10 to 12 up. And I think the reason I might have a higher up is because of what you said. I'm not competing against anybody doing, publishing of anything, probably anywhere around me.
Yeah. My experience has been pretty good. I mean, I'm paying $80 a month, but for my phone, I'm using a different service. I'm using Ooma. I don't know if you've ever heard of Ooma. Basically, you pay for a device, approximately $150, and then the only thing you pay is the state and local taxes on the utility, which turns out to about $4.25 a month, and I've been extremely happy with that.
Wow.
So the highest level power internet on Uverse right now is going for $65 a month at 45 down. Special offer pricing, so I'm not sure if that jumps up to $75 a month.
See, that's not bad. That's what you have to get into, is how long can you harass that carrier, to keep your price low.
I'm not going to say anything. I think I told you guys this story, but so when I cut off the cable with them, they said to me, well, you're going to watch streaming on HD and you're going to use up that bandwidth. And I said, how much should I get? Like 50 gigs. And I'm like, okay. So I said, like on my phone, I get an alert when I approach my bandwidth limit. They said, yeah. So they sent me this page, and it's supposed to be like a dashboard page and tell me how much I've used. It says, oh, don't worry about it. We'll tell you when you use up the bandwidth. So I haven't, I was going to upgrade then. I was going to I'll spend $20 more. I'm not spending $80 on programming. And now I'm like, you know what? Screw it. If I can keep this $45 a month, and so far I'll wait till I hit the cap. The other thing that was interesting, I said, how much is the overage? I thought the overage fee would be really high. It was like $10 for another 5 gig. And I was like, oh, well, that's fine. I'll wait till I go over twice and test it out. And so that was almost a year ago.
Yeah.
But I do think Google coming in it's definitely going to turn it on its side a bit, because I agree. I mean, in Ryan's case, Time Warner is the old Cablevision that laid that cable back in 1979 and hasn't done much, other than add in fiber lines that they put in probably in the 90s when they got rid of the original infrastructure. Tim, you're in newer construction, but you're in Johnston County, right?
Yes.
So I mean, it's not as populated and stuff. I think I lucked out with the U-verse. I think we were in a high density neighborhood in Cary, and probably like all the numbers hit just right. And we're close to the central service because we're 2 miles from downtown Cary, which I'm sure the main pipe running through Cary hits, the main backbone. Plus, probably having SAS didn't hurt in the neighborhood.
Daddy, what's a backbone?
Exactly. Children, let's talk fiber backbone that the phone company laid down. It also reminds me of so back when I first was working with Ericsson and the web came out in like 96, 97, someone from Bell South, when you said Bell South DCS earlier, it reminded me, but they, we were talking about, this World Wide Web's great, the internet's much more accessible to people, it's not just these 2 or 3 guys in the basement, and she goes, oh, you mean our information superhighway? And I was like, well, you guys may have laid a lot of the infrastructure for it, but like nobody really owns it. That's it's kind of this open thing, of computers connecting and not having to go through a central vendor or processing system.
You know what? That's crazy talk. What are you talking about? So that reminds me. So here's something that if you really want to get nerdy about this issue of bandwidth and who owns the internet, we would be remiss without talking about the whole net neutrality stuff with our good old legislature, our Congress, all the lobbyists, and all the big business folks that are, want to have their way. And so I think net neutrality itself, if we define it really quick, it's essentially, how would you characterize it, Brian? So net neutrality is the idea that we almost like a bill of rights for the internet, right? We as individuals should have access to the internet, basically. If you boil it down into really, really like 8th grade layman's terms, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's kind of like the airwaves.
Right. So you can't own air, right? But we have the ICANN organization. We have Google. We have all the folks that have bought certain parts of the spectrum. We have all of the big broadband and mobile companies that are lobbying Congress. And I don't know which of you, if any of you are using Verizon, but I mean they really are trying to lock things down, I think. And so I think that's one of the biggest fears on the broadband side of the house with Comcast is that we're really worried about monopolies because we're worried about it becoming another AT&T, like AT&T was, decades ago. Bells, when it was the Bells, and they had to break them up. So I think we're headed to a showdown like that with the internet, frankly. And you would have thought we would have already settled it by now. But I think the gigabit, the fiber movements that you see by Google or by these other smaller folks, they are essentially doing the land grab for this part of the spectrum, so that it is essentially a shot across Comcast's bow, I think, because they see this coming.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've talked with people that think the Comcast TWC merger is a good thing, and I just shake my head, because anytime 2 larger companies come together, it rarely is a good move for a consumer, ever. It's strictly a business decision, and someone's going to be profiting in a much higher level because of that. Now, in terms of Time Warner, I have some knowledge of Time Warner, because probably I would say about 12 years ago I left my job with Time Warner. I was with them for a few years. I was a network administrator for them, working for the cable division in upstate New York, and I know a lot about how cable is priced and what the goals there are. I believe that the merger is really just a grab for some of the bigger markets like New York City, Manhattan served by Time Warner. I'm not 100% certain that this Comcast merger with them is going to hold in all of the areas. Although the Triangle area is not a small area, it's not one of the top 10 biggest markets in the U.S., and I think that this is really designed to grab a very large market share of users. So there is a chance, and I've heard some discussion about potentially after this merger that some of the non-lucrative markets would be sold off to other companies. That's just, I'm not sure 100% what the accuracy of those discussions are, but I have heard that discussed.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, yeah, think about it, because Google saying, okay, we're going to come to Triangle. I mean, what does the Triangle do? They jump up and down. They're a lapdog, and like, what do you want, right? Because they want to be. I mean, and I think it's good for the area, and I think PR-wise, it's great and all that. But yeah, we're not New York, right? And I think you're right, Tim. Like, that's the end game eventually is New York, Chicago, like the giant media markets. Because
you already have LA, yeah.
But going into those markets, I mean, is not the walk in the park of coming into Raleigh and saying, oh yeah, we'll do that. You push it through, we'll build it, and yeah, it'll be great user story. It's kind of like almost like selling software, right? I might give it away to the local community college because I want the big state university system to buy the long-term multi-license deal that's going to be my bread and butter. So if I can show them that it works and I get some good local PR, and it's a good thing to do and all that. So I don't think it's all self-serving interest, but at the same time, it was going across my mind too of like, yeah, they're going to go into Denver, they're going to go into Raleigh, they're going to go into these markets, but when are they going to go into the big market? And then not just the big markets in the U.S. When are they going to go to Japan? When are they going to go to Asia? Think about the money that Google as a bandwidth deliver in the largest growing economy in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. All right, so you know what? We got a little bit of time. So you guys, as far as what you do in your spare time, how excited would you be to have upload speeds and the ability to take a lot of the content you guys are creating, which is more than just writing blog posts, where we can do that on very little bandwidth, but you guys are shooting a lot of video, recording a lot of audio, which is very memory intensive. So for second screeners and stuff, how would something like Google Fiber, you think, help you out?
Well, I think it would ease maybe speed up our process, but in terms of storage, I personally am paying for media server storage on a monthly basis, and I'm not allotted a tremendous amount of space. I think I'm paying $20 a month for 400 megabytes maybe of storage. That it's on a rolling monthly basis, so I can upload 400 megabytes a month, and then it kind of gets archived and it remains there. But then my counter starts over again for the next month. And that's with a company called Libsyn, and that's optimized as kind of like more or less a CDN or a content delivery network for video or audio. Because most of the hosted platforms that are affordable for blogs and different internet properties are relatively. You can get hosting for about $100 a year at the most on a shared hosting platform, but when you're involving very intensive processes that's going to pop up a processor on a shared virtual server somewhere, they're going to come after you if you're distributing a lot of content via that platform. So you have to pay for an off-site service that streams that stuff up with a lot of fast connections and high bandwidth. So I think in terms of how it would affect me, I think it would probably affect more my consumption of content in terms of audio or video more than anything else, rather than my, I wouldn't say productivity because it would speed up the process, but I think it would be more or less my consumption of either entertainment or educational content. I do a lot of watching tutorial videos on how to do things, whether it be audio or video or graphics creation. That's all very bandwidth intensive. Like Ryan, I'm streaming Spotify. I've also got Beats Music on my mobile device that I stream through the web interface as well. So that's pulling down some figures. But I'm more interested in the reliable, decent pipeline at a more affordable price. Mm-hmm. Because I think the lack of competition is what's really kind of wedged us into the market, expecting it's just like cable and satellite. Why are we expected to pay $120 a month? Because quite honestly, the media companies and the way the pricing models for both cable and satellite are put together, it's not foreseeably possible to pay, even using an a la carte process, to pay less money to get, even a handful of channels, just because of the way the marketing model works. So I would just like to see it inject some really steep pricing competition into the market, more or less anything else.
Yeah, and I would also assert that it would not only help all my personal side projects, like podcasting with Tim, but it would also help me in my professional life, because honestly, I'm a remote worker, right? Even though I have an office in RTP, I work in marketing, and all of my colleagues are spread out across the country, across the world. So the majority of my time is spent at home eating up bandwidth, no matter what I'm doing. So whether it's everything from the phone call that I make on Vonage, to email, to using my mobile phone when, I want to do that, to the bandwidth that I'm using to upload a YouTube video for my business, for my job, my day job. All of that is all very bandwidth intensive, and when you add it up, I'm paying for that out of my pocket. That's just expected of me. So we don't have a business environment even that would support, in my case. I mean, other people, I think, get stipends, or they get subsidies for that kind of service, but in my job I don't. So it's a real concern for me professionally, both from the cost of it and from the bandwidth, because I would love a fatter pipe to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Everything I do is bandwidth intensive. It doesn't matter if it's at 7 in the morning or 7 at night.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all three of us share that. So all three of us work in technology and manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And then I think definitely the trend of streaming. Whereas I think 5 years ago, I was using up the bandwidth on sites, and the thought of really streaming was a terrible experience, and I even remember when the 3G networks were out, and we were talking some of the mesh networks that we were building for some small communities, and one of the guys says, do you ever try to watch a video over 3G? It's terrible. You don't want to watch it, But now it's happening, and 4G is here, and LTE, that it's definitely a part of our everyday life. And I agree with you, Tim, especially on the educational side. Especially like on the weekends, I'm in my garage and I'm trying to figure out a part number. I'm trying to figure out how to put this together. It's invaluable. And I definitely see that savings. Like, I might have spent 2 weeks fixing something that now I can probably do in 5 minutes, or at least make the decision that it's not worth. Because it looks much more complicated, but I don't have to go talk to 20 different people at 3 different stores to find out, or to get to that answer.
It's a part of our life. I mean, I was at my parents bought a house about 10 minutes from mine, and I put one of those, keyless entry locks on their garage door, and for some reason, my father, must have thrown the package away, and I was missing a piece of instruction. So what did I do? I looked it up on my phone. And he doesn't have internet at his new house yet, so I'm using that pipeline to do tasks that normally would have involved me driving 15, 20 minutes to a store, asking a salesperson that might not know the answer, when I can take that into my own hands and do it. So it's incredibly enabling, but we've become so dependent upon this. I mean, think about what happens when your power goes out. Okay, well, the power goes out, and for a while we're okay because you know what, we've got a charged phone. And unless you've got 15 different Mophie powered devices like Ryan has, where you can charge your phone theoretically for days without plugging in, you're not able to, once that battery dies, unless you find a power source, you're done. We're so dependent upon that now that internet is, which is why I think I'm very interested to see how the discussion with Wake Forest goes, Ryan, because I think that internet as a commercial venture is iffy because it's almost a commodity now,
Right.
and it should be a public utility.
Right.
Certainly, just like electricity, you pay for consumption of electricity,
Right.
but that's regulated, whereas this is not.
Well, I think that goes directly back to what the heck is the U.S. government going to do about net neutrality, right? They need to own that conversation, and right now they're just, in my eyes, they're just being pushed around by the big people with the deep pockets that can afford lobbyists, right?
Yeah.
And so I think your comment about utility is really key because that's how I thought about this from the get-go, right? My kids, going back to that everyday life thing, it is like water to them. It is like electricity to them. The internet is just as important as those things. And when you think about it in terms of a utility, the only thing that makes me worried about it becoming a utility or a commodity is if some of those companies decide to get out of the business, just like other large technology companies, like, I don't know if there's a similar analogy to like IBM getting out of the PC business or that sort of thing. There's not a one-to-one comparison there, but if that happens, then who would buy it? Who would run it? Who would make that utility a reality? Would it be like a Duke Energy, or would it be a company like that that's regulated, but still very tightly, working with the government, or would it be more like a co-op? Like we use an energy co-op here where I live, where it's more like the approach of having a federal credit union type of financial institution. So I think there's a lot of open questions there, but I think those are the right questions we should be asking about this. If we want fiber to become a utility, should Google run it? That's a great question.
Well, you remember the power companies were talking about bringing it in to the home, and we even had our former power company, what is now Duke Energy, Carolina Power and Light, buy Interpath. And I remember at first hearing that, I was like, oh, this is brilliant. Why not? They're bringing power in. Why can't they bring in internet? But I think it was a totally different animal and a different way people were buying it. And the phone companies figured it out at first, well, especially since it was easier to go through their infrastructure at the time. But they understood how to run a communication network, whereas I think the power companies, it was very foreign to them. And I think that's why Google's definitely going into it, because their focus is on user experience, and collaboration, those type of things. And so this makes perfect sense. But I agree. What's it going to be like? Say this Google footprint in 20 years. What's it going to look like?
Well, it also goes back to the question of, when you look at some of the other changes that Google is making to their application ecosystem, and going all the way back to the bread and butter of their business, advertising and search. They're frankly making a lot of changes in that space, and that's their oldest business, if you will. They're making a lot of changes in that space where they really are clamping down on what you can and can't do and how they're monetizing that, and it's becoming much more stringent. I just literally read an article today about how they're going to start blocking the ability to see paid search, terms, so that you can't really predict how to do organic search very well. So the question becomes, does Google still live by the mantra, "Don't be evil"? At the end of the day, and can they be trusted to roll out? They look less evil than Comcast, but is that good enough?
All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you for your time this evening. I know it took us a while to get together, but I'm glad we did. I always enjoy talking to you guys. I always learn a lot too.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and this is definitely a topic that I'd like to welcome a public discussion of this topic, perhaps in an event in the future as well, and maybe we can talk with somebody like Phil or whatnot, and I'm not sure how it would tie in, but he's definitely tied into the Google ecosystem with SEO topics and whatnot. But I'd like to see some public discussions in this area, because obviously it's gotten a lot of attention in the media with the different fiber companies, all vying for local municipalities, and the big news, everybody jumping up and down when they saw the Google Fiber trucks in the area. So.
Well, do you need to do a little shameless plug for the Fibered Up event here?
Yeah, we could. I mean, it's I gotta look up the date. I can't remember. Is it May 6th at CAM?
I want to say May 1st.
May 1st, that's right. So May 1st is the Fibered Up premiere, and I believe if you go to Fibered Up the movie.
Is that Camden doing that?
No, it's Eric.
Oh, Eric. Oh, that's right. Okay, Eric's doing that. I forgot. That's right.
Trying to talk to Camden, but
Camden's doing the beer one. I've seen a lot with that.
Go to fiberedup.com. Up top in the top right-hand corner, attend the premiere. Will take you to an Eventbrite page, and you can register for free.
Awesome. So there's a chance that a portion of our little chat here might be a part of that?
Yes, that's what we're kind of doing. This is to provide different people's opinions, input, emotional feelings.
Well, if you can do any kind of CGI to fix this whole look I have tonight and cut out all the boring parts, I think that'll be awesome.
So that'll be the past 60 minutes.
No, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you asking us on to do this, Brian.
No problem. No problem. And next time I'm talking to you guys, we're going to talk music.
Awesome. Yes, let's do that.
I'm starting my podcast, so
there's lots of shows that I want to talk to you about. Honestly, Tim and I have been talking about a few shows that are coming up.
So yeah, once you stop broadcast, once you click stop broadcast there, just go ahead and hang in the hangout here for a little bit.